Another drop from the Edward Snowden files, and this one is people talking about a possible break between America and the Israeli government. This while those who understand the global dynamic insist there is no tighter bond than that between the governments and their spies. Hazing on a college campus used to be limited to the frat and sorority houses, ancient history. But what has been happening in the band is perhaps scarier than anything Animal House could have ever thought of. And it does not seem to end despite warnings and lawsuits. And the end of a certain type of economics, something that will affect you. We have the answers. We question everything for Tuesday, August 5th, 2014. The word for the day is Keynesian. Double bonus points for those who know what the word is, what it entails, and how it might affect every single one of us. We'll elucidate and talk more about that word and so much more after John Bachman deals this edition of Newsmax Now.
Well, Ed, the Pentagon still has not released the name of that American two-star general killed at a military base in Afghanistan earlier today. That shooter was wearing an Afghan army uniform, though. He opened fire during a meeting of NATO officers and U.S. troops. The U.S. officials have also confirmed that several other American service members were injured during the insider attack. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby says this latest insider attack will not deter the U.S. from working closely with Afghan troops while the U.S. forces continue their withdrawal.
I've seen no indication that there's a degradation of trust between coalition members and their Afghan counterparts.
Well, he also added that these insider threats to military personnel in Afghanistan are difficult to stop, saying the country is still in a war zone. Kirby also says the investigation is in its very early phases. That two-star general is the highest-ranking military official killed during America's 13-year war in Afghanistan. Now to New York, where health officials say it's unlikely a man being tested for Ebola at Mount Sinai Hospital actually will have the disease. But still, this situation gave us all an idea of just how tense things can get with Ebola fear spreading faster than the virus itself. The male patient in New York is in quarantine. He complained of symptoms including high fever and stomach pains. Important to note that man had also recently traveled to Africa. His test results are expected back soon, but again, it's unlikely his is another case of Ebola.
It's much more likely that it's a much more common condition. We're ruling those things out as well in conjunction with the CDC, who's been guiding us on the testing protocol.
That press conference was late yesterday afternoon. The CDC says the test results should come back sometime in the next 24 hours. Now to Mexico, where U.S. Marine Andrew Tamaresi is still in prison and is going to be there for a few more months. The Marine Sergeant was back in court yesterday, as his lawyer now says he could be there for a while. Tamaresi was arrested, of course, when he made a wrong turn and accidentally drove into Mexico with 3 guns he had registered legally in the United States. There is no new hearing date as of yet. Of course, his lawyer does believe, again, this trial could drag out for several more months. Now, a similar story developing in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, happening to a woman named Shaneen Allen. She was pulled over by police in Atlantic City, New Jersey, which is about an hour outside of Philly. The 27-year-old told officers she had a gun in her car, and she presented them with her concealed weapons permit from Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, that license was not valid in New Jersey. Prosecutors are meeting with defense attorneys today, having a pretrial hearing. That case continues. Again, she does face 3 years in prison. More news ahead. I'm John Bachman. Now back to Ed MidPoint.
We must do everything within our power to enable the International Criminal Court to bring to justice those responsible for committing war crimes and crimes against humanity in the current conflict in Gaza. Committed by Israeli government and its occupational army.
In the world of spies, counter-spies, backroom dealings, and those who work in the shadows, there is perhaps no tighter bond than the one between our own National Security Agency and the government of Israel. Part of that due to the fact these might be the best there is at what they do. But a new report indicates Israel might be one of those countries the NSA and others have to worry about. Welcome to MidPoint. The man who created and put into place the FBI's first counterterrorism training and education program, a former agent with the Bureau, and author of the newly released book, Raising a Jihadi Generation. John Guandolo joins us right here on MidPoint today. John, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
John, is it fair to say that if it comes down to between the NSA and any other government around the world in sharing secrets and in having a tight bond, that maybe we share our tightest with the Israelis?
That would be a fair assessment.
Why is that? What is it about the Israelis that make them such perfect partners?
Well, first of all, they are a free government and a free system, and have always been a sister to the United States, and certainly out of our heritage, our Judeo-Christian heritage, Israel, the Christian faith comes out of the Jewish faith. So there is both a cultural, social, and a political bond there that's always existed.
What is it that we learn from them? Because they are so good at so many things, and I'm going to talk about some of the things that they might have even missed here a little bit. But what is it that they're so good at that we need to learn, that is important for us on a global society?
Well, two things. I'll just start with a quick story. Former CIA Director Jim Woolsey tells a very brief story about being over at Ben Gurion Airport and talking to the security director there and asking him, what do you think the difference is between the way you do security and the way we, the United States, do? And after the gentleman stopped laughing, he said, yes, well, we're actually trying to catch terrorists. And I think that the lesson there in that little anecdote, which is a true story, is they take what's happening and what always happens very seriously, because they have enemies around them who say on a regular basis, we seek to destroy you, and then they daily take actions to do that, not just in the violent realm, but in the counterintelligence realm, subversion, all kinds of ways that they come at Israel. So Israel has become very adept at dealing with these threats.
You talked a little bit about, and you just mentioned here, laughter, when they talked about what they do and what they don't do here. What is it that makes them laugh here? Is it our complacency? Is it our arrogance, believing that we are Americans and we're always right, no matter what anybody else says?
I think they see what most Americans see, and that's that our security apparatus is incompetent and grossly failing. I mean, if you look at the 3 or 4 biggest potential attacks in America, being Najib Azazi's 12 suicide bombs in New York City, the Christmas Day bomber, also known as the underwear bomber, is totally missed by our national apparatus, and it was only because of, quite frankly, good fortune that those things didn't turn out into massive disasters. And then all you got to do is go through an airport security, and you see individuals who are clearly Sharia compliant jihadis, if you know what you're looking for, actually running radars as TSA supervisors, while 90-year-old nuns and 6-year-old children are getting the full cavity search. I mean, it's ludicrous. And even both political parties in America have started to say this and realize this, but from a national security standpoint, from a counterintelligence and a counterterrorism standpoint, the way we are handling it is nuts, and the Israelis see that.
Well, wait a minute. When you say incompetent here, why are we incompetent then? It sounds like a simple question, but we have so much money. We are supposedly have the best people, the best equipment. We supposedly have the reason behind us. So what is it that makes you say and others see us as incompetent?
Because after over 13 years of fighting, certainly 12 plus years in the current wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and as you notice, in about dozens of other countries around the world where the war is going on, just different battlefronts in the same global war, the United States national security apparatus still to this day has failed to identify the enemy and identify it for what it is. And yet Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood, Tablighi Jamaat, Jamaati Islami, you name it, they all say we're Muslims waging jihad in order to impose Sharia and establish the global Islamic State, the Caliphate. And our national security apparatus continues to say that what we're facing has nothing to do with that. And that's, I consider that to be psychotically disconnected from reality.
Then who is the person leading this psychotic disconnection here? Is it simply the president? Is it the levels of leadership that we have in this country? Because there's got to be somebody there who's the one pushing that forward.
Well, you can go back to President Clinton, President Bush, this current president, their national security advisors, and currently the leadership in both political parties up on Capitol Hill. You know, just a couple quick examples. Back in 2012, you had 5 members of Congress, 5 Republicans, put forth letters to the inspector generals of the key components of our government, saying we have a massive issue here. They laid out facts that had already been entered into evidence in some of the largest terrorism financing and terrorism trials in U.S. history, and they were met with rebukes by their own party, not just by the Democrats or by the media or by the jihadi organizations that normally pipe up like CARE and others. And so you had the leadership, John Boehner and Eric Cantor and Marco Rubio and John McCain, calling these other members of Congress in their own party racists and bigots, when what they laid on the table was an evidentiary and a factual understanding of a real and present and imminent threat in the United States, and they're just gaffing it off. That's criminal because Americans are now dead because of this brush off by our senior leadership. But this also includes the leadership of the national security apparatus. The question is, the evidence is on the table to today to indict the top 25 plus of the largest Islamic organizations in this country for direct ties to terrorism and to, and I'll leave it just to terrorism, and we're not doing anything. And so the question has to be asked, why not?
I got about 90 seconds left here then. Is it your opinion that the people who now run the National Security Agency and the NSA itself perhaps needs to be completely disbanded or else redone from top to bottom?
I think the leadership needs to be gutted, and those who the Department of Justice can charge, they should be arrested and charged. And you can, we can have a longer discussion about what those charges are. But, we put every day for criminal misconduct. And that same standard, that legal standard, applies to those people who swear an oath to the Constitution and willingly and wittingly disregard that oath, and Americans die in places like Boston, Little Rock, Arkansas, Fort Hood, Texas.
I have about a minute left. I want your reaction to this, because this came out in the Edward Snowden documents. This was in Newsweek. Israel singled out in 2007 as a top espionage threat against the U.S. government, including its intelligence services. This was the 2007 Strategic Mission List. Kind of a strange thing to say about an ally.
Well, yes, and you've got a situation right now, and quite frankly, for the last several years, Israel has been under increasing heat from its neighbors, enemies who swear their destruction, and they're doing everything they can to know where we stand. I certainly don't condone it. If we catch them doing it, we should act appropriately, but that's what I think you're witnessing there.
John, I think what we're going to do is have you back at another time, because you'd mentioned a lot of charges here. Can you give us in 15 seconds just what 1 or 2 of those might be?
Sure. Well, you certainly have criminal negligence. When you swear an oath to the Constitution, that comes with a legal duty to know or do due diligence to know the enemy. And with all the evidence on the table, most of it already being in federal trials, for a national security leader like the former FBI director to say in an open session of Congress he didn't know that the mosque where the Boston bombers were quote unquote radicalized was created by an Al-Qaeda guy who we have in jail that the FBI arrested, that's just gross criminal negligence.
We'll have to stop it there. John Guandolo's book, Raising a Jihadi Generation, can be purchased at his website, understandingthethreat.com, Amazon, or other major bookstores. John, thanks so much for joining us. We will do it again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Later on this hour, On Point focuses on the reality of what is happening with the Ebola investigation in Atlanta. And next up, economics. What you need to understand.